Hey builders, I get the impression that a couple of you are understandably nervous about putting the black pinstriping on your tables. So I made a little template that makes the job a little easier, and I'm going to show you how to use it in this video. All right, so here's the template, and this template was made specifically for the Dejarik Creations version 2 table files. You might be able to get away with using it on the version 1 files, or maybe even some of the other printed tables available, but I made this template specifically for those files. So just a quick note. I recommend you print it out on some sturdy paper, like some cardstock. And you just need one of them. There's 3 on here, but that's just because it gets pretty banged up during the job sometimes. And so we just cut it out. I cut it out with the X-Acto knife. And I'll show you how that goes. All right, so before I get started here, let me show you the lay of the land here. I'm using a 1/8 inch automotive black pinstripe. You can also use 3mm if you find that easier. I just picked this up from my local automotive store. And if you look at the tape, you'll see there's a top line that goes almost all the way across. It breaks right here near the segmented displays and then continues all the way across. And then you have these 2 boxes, this one really long box and this smaller box, and then these 2 lines in between our segmented displays. And the way this template will work is we're just going to mark basically where our tape's going to go. And you'll see as I sit this here, these little squares match up with where the pinstriping is. And it's spaced in such a way where you can put it flush against the side of your table and the spacing is just right, or between your segmented displays to figure out where the edges of those are. And I'll go through that with you now. All right, so if you take your template and you just slightly bend the bottom of it like that, this is meant to sit on your table so that that bottom edge is flush with our ridge. And so if it's slightly bent there, it makes it easier to get it flush with the bottom ridge there. Now I'm going to start over here on the far right. And if you recall, we had that one line that goes across the top, stops here at the segment displays, and then we had this box that goes around here. So I'm going to use a fine-tipped Sharpie, and that's just because I've done this before. You can use whatever marking tool you think is safe for your purposes. But basically what I do is I know I've got a piece of pinstripe that's going to terminate here on the end. So I'm just going to make a little corner. I'll do it here as well. And again, I've got this 1/4 inch gap, and so this is just spaced right, so we can mark those. And then down here, I'll mark a corner here. All right, then what I do is I go about every inch or so. You can space it with your lights or do as many or as few as you want. I say the more the merrier because it makes it easier to lay the stripe. So I'm going to do it about every inch. I put a dot in the top upper corner of these. So you'll see I put a dot there, a dot there, a dot there, there, and then down here. A dot and a dot. And again, make sure that it's flush with the bottom ridge here. So I'm going to do that about every inch. All right, now once you get to this point where you're meeting up this square along this edge of your segmented display here, if you rest this, again, get it flush with the bottom there, rest it against the segmented display. And this one actually has a really short gap between the display and the pinstriping. So I'm going to use the inner. So instead of marking it on this outer one, I'm going to use this inner one here. And that gives me that 1/8 inch or so gap. And I might as well mark this top one too. And then mark the bottom one. Just that upper corner. All right, so if we did it right, we've got dots span across this whole spiel, go down, across the bottom, and the area in your display. All right, so take your pinstriping tape and cut just a little longer than what you're going to need. In this case, with the top, remember the top one is going to go to the end of this segmented display right here. So I'm going to make sure that I have a piece long enough for that. And then this one basically runs into our segmented display. And same story down here. So I'm just going to do the linear, the horizontal stripes first. All right, so you want a nice square edge on your pinstripe. And that corner that I drew at the beginning is where we're going to start. So I just take my pinstripe and I line the corner up so that it overlaps my Sharpie line. So I just covered up my little corner with the tape. And then what I do is I can see where the tape needs to go. So I'm just going to cover up the dots, just barely cover up all those dots that I drew for this line. And the nice thing is this stuff peels up really easy. So if you make a mistake, it's very easy to pull it off or start again or go back a little. I'm just going to touch the tops of all those dots, just cover them up. And it's okay if we go longer than where we want to go, and I'll show you. I'll just cut it off. All right, and this looks a hair wonky, but I can go back and fix it. And then this one, again, it terminates right here at the end of our segment display. So I'm just going to take a nice sharp razor and just sort of push down on it. And then pull this remainder off. All right, there's our first line. So, moving on. Line the corner up. And follow the dots. All right, now I'm going to cut this one at the mark I made here. All right, so to do these vertical lines, I basically just take my tape and overlap the corner of the other tape. Follow that line down to the corner at the bottom. And I overshoot it, which is fine. And then what I do is I get it nice and flat and I look for where that overlap is, and I just run my blade along that, peel up that excess, down here where it's overshooting. Again, I just follow where the overlap starts. Peel up that excess, pull it off. All right, so moving on to in between the segmented displays, there are two pinstripes that run up the middle of these displays. And they run the entire distance from the bottom of the pinstriping up to the top of the other pinstriping. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay our template in here. And these lines basically run through the middle of our template. So you'll see this middle 3mm line is basically where our pinstriping is going to go. So to mark these ones, I'm going to get that again flush with the ridge at the bottom. I'm going to put a line. You can put your line on either side of that center line, but just make sure you're consistently putting it on the same side. So I'm going to put it on this side here. Put a line going down each of those. And that'll leave me with these guide marks here. And then when I go to put my tape on, I'm going to match it up so it just overlaps those lines. And then cut it so that it's flush with the top here. And again, I just push my blade on it just lightly. And then usually, if you've got a nice sharp blade, this should just break away. Have your tape overlap your line. All right, so moving on to the home stretch here, just like we did on the other side of the segmented display, we're going to put this flush against the display, and again, the gap's only about 1/8 of an inch, so I'm going to do it on the inside square here. I'm going to put a line there and a dot on this one because it's going to run through, and then down here on the bottom, put a line. Then I'm going to take my template and I'm going to go along this entire thing and do the dots. Dots on each upper corner of each square all the way across. All right, so now that we've reached the end here, again, we could just go flush with the side of the table. And we want about a 1/4 inch gap, so we're going to use this square, the outermost square here. And I'm just going to draw them. All right, and I made a pretty messy job of all of it, but you can see I've got dots going all across. I messed up. Some of them I put them on the bottom corner or the top corner, but it doesn't really matter as long as your marks are within the squares. The tape should cover them up. All right, so again, we're going to cut our pinstriping so that it's longer than the distance we want to go. Cut a nice square end on it. And then we're going to line that corner up with the corner that we drew so that it overlaps the Sharpie or the mark that you've made. And then we just follow along so that we cover each of our dots. just cover them with the top of my pinstriping. All right. So this stuff is extremely forgiving, so if you happen to make a mistake as you're going along, or you put one on and you don't like it, just peel it off and do it again. As it sits on here for a while, once you're happy with it, you can press it all down firmly, and as it sits over days and weeks, it will get harder to remove. So right now, feel free to peel it on and off and redo it over and over again. And cut this one off at the mark we made earlier. Alright, now we can finish with our vertical striping. And again, I just line the corners of my pinstripe up. Follow it down to the other corner. Find where my overlap is. Cut the corner off. Same down here. All right, once you're completely done and happy with it, make sure you're happy with it, because at this stage it's easier to take it off, but later on, if you try and adjust things, you might actually take up some of your paint, because as it sits on there, it's going to get firmer and firmer. Assuming you're happy, run your fingers down the striping with hard pressure. Just make sure they're nice and flat and put on. And you're all done. Congratulations on making it this far on your build. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. Just reply in the comments below. Thank you for watching.